Hey! Hey everyone! Welcome to our Airbnb, which you would have seen in Shalea's Twitter videos from yesterday. So, Shalea's at the conference venue right now, having her networking lunch with her fellow communication nerds. So I'm waiting for her here at our Airbnb before we can go out for the afternoon and meet up with Jessica, Kevin, and with Hannah Alka. So while I'm waiting here, I thought of writing my Descendant of the Crane review, which is super overdue. I am so sorry. But I am a trash person who cannot fully put into words in a very articulate manner how I felt about Descendant of the Crane because it was just so good. So yeah, I could not write it. I tried. Last night, I was up until midnight. I sat down at the table in the kitchen of this apartment, brought out my laptop, opened a Google Doc, and just stared. I could not. I really could not. Like, I got as far as like ranting about how much I loved the cover, and then nothing. I really just could not say how much I loved it. So I figured, why not try to make a video? I might have better luck talking about it than I do writing. Anyway, it seems to work for booktubers. Yeah, so I'm not a professional booktuber. I'm not a booktuber, period. So I am only filming this on my phone. I could probably use my Fujifilm camera, but it's like outside in the living room and I'm too lazy to stand up and get it. Yeah. So, Descendant of the Crane. Gonna try to make a video review of it. Let's see how this works out. So, Descendant of the Crane was comped as Chinese Game of Thrones. But, truth be told, it is a lot better. Like, I'm sorry, GOT fans, but facts are facts, America! In the words of Monique Hart, the heart of season 10. Watch RPDR. Anyway, facts are facts. And the truth of the matter is, Joanne is able to do things with her characters, make them grow and learn as people, without having to subject them to like the most horrific things that can happen to a character, particularly to a female character. Let's compare for a moment the journeys of Daenerys Targaryen and Sansa Stark. In order for them to grow and mature and be fully realized as the strong, empowered female characters that are now, they had to have like really horrible things happen to them. Abuse, rape, off the top of my head. It's been a while since I watched Game of Thrones, but yeah. Ew, sorry, I have a cold. Anyway, excuse me one moment. Okay, I am so sorry. I don't have like video editing equipment to delete that. Anyway, to delete that and like splice the videos together the way that booktubers do. There's just gonna be one like stream of consciousness video. Yeah. Oh. How do booktubers do this? I feel ridiculous. Okay, but anyway, so Descendant of the Crane. Yes, better than Game of Thrones. The female characters, Hasina in particular, go on their journey, their story arc to become better people, to become empowered queens without having those horrific things happening to them. So props to Joanne for that, and yeah, that's one reason why I feel that Descendant of the Crane is much better than Game of Thrones. Alright, so Descendant of the Crane is part murder mystery, part court intrigue. And if you've been following my blog for quite some time, then you'll probably know that one of the things that I love the most in my fantasy is good political intrigue. Off the top of my head, I am thinking of Jade City by Fonda Lee. I mean, I pretty much rant on Twitter all the time about how much I love how it involves like the politics and the economy of having Jade being a thing. Excuse me. I have no editing equipment. I'm so sorry. But yeah, how it handles Jade being a thing rather than just being like, oh, fantasy, poof, there you go. So Descendant of the Crane does that. It pretty much mirrors like the Confucian principles of having like the civil service exam and so forth that happened in medieval China, with the added element of magic, particularly soothsaying or fortune telling, being outlawed. And apparently that was how like the emperors of old gained power in Yan, in the kingdom. So in the interest of remaining fair to each and every citizen, magic was outlawed. So the political intrigue involves, well, obviously, Hasina is a princess, and when her father dies, she becomes queen. And she thinks that her father was murdered and didn't die of natural causes, which is where the murder mystery part comes in. So, in order to solve the mystery, Scooby Doo! In order to solve the mystery, so, for like, she has to have like a court trial, and she consults a soothsayer, which is supposed to be like really high treason. So she consults a soothsayer and asks what's she gonna do. And the soothsayer says that there is a convict in the palace with like a rod who is meant to help her. So she pulls some strings, which she's not supposed to do, technically speaking, as the queen, which is also treason, like if you like do corrupt shit. And she pulls some strings anyway, helped by like another corrupt official, and manages to get that convict with a rod that the soothsayer told her about as her representative during the investigation of the case. And throughout the investigation of the case, basically what happens is that, one, she discovers that the court that she grew up in, that she thought was safe and perfect, and that she would one day rule over as queen, isn't exactly as honest and well oiled, and basically just, a government with integrity that she thought it was. It's a lot more corrupt. It's got like the same old thing of government officials bribing here, and more government officials making a mockery of court processes over there and all that. So it's a disillusionment thing, basically. And it doesn't just happen inside the court. She's grown up thinking that the principles that she lives by, that their kingdom was founded on, ensure happiness and safety and equality for all of the kingdom's citizens. But in the course of investigating her father's death, she discovers that that's not true at all, that there's still suffering and poverty and inequality and all sorts of evils happening in her kingdom. So it's an eye-opening thing. It's a disillusionment thing. It's an eye-opening thing. And she resolves that she's going to be a better queen than her parents were. So that's one part of it, the court and political intrigue. The murder mystery part, it's more of a personal journey. It's not just her journey of deciding that, oh, hey, I'm going to be a good queen, I'm going to make this kingdom better. But it's also a thing of her discovering that her father and her mother aren't exactly who she thinks they are. And it's family secrets. It's an unearthing of things that if they had stayed buried, she would have lived a happy life, but at the expense of the truth, at the expense of knowing the truth and being able to act upon it. Speaking of family, Descendant of the Crane also deals with a theme that I personally adore, which is that of family. Most Asian countries and cultures, I think all, I'm not sure, I'm not qualified to say that, but I do think that most Asian cultures really put a premium on family, and Descendant of the Crane touches on that. Hasina herself has filial piety towards her parents, despite the fact that her mother is pretty outright emotionally abusive. And the four siblings! Oh my god, the four siblings! Okay, so we have Hasina, Sanjing, Lilian, and Kayan. Hasina and Sanjing are the biological children of the king and queen. Hasina is going to be the next queen, while Sanjing is supposed to like inherit the position of like general of the Yan army. Meanwhile, Lilian and Kayan were orphans that Hasina's father took in and gave positions in the court. And the relationships between all four of them are so complex and I could talk about them all day. Probably won't because this video is already 10 minutes according to the counter. But yeah, so things are so complex between Cyan and Hesina. Cyan, oh my goodness. Ship name? No, I'm kidding. No, do not ship siblings, not even adopted siblings. No bueno. Anyway, I go off on tangents a lot. How do booktubers stay like on one topic? I don't know. Anyway, so the relationship between Sanjing and Hesina is really complex. Sanjing feels that like Hesina has replaced him with Lillian and Kayan, and then the relationship between Sanjing and Kayan, fraught with tension, fraught with anger, fraught with everything that can be negative about a sibling relationship. And then Kayan and Hesina, those who've read Descendant of the Crane, you already know what I'm talking about. And then the relationship also between Hesina and Lillian. Descendant of the Crane fans, you already know what I'm talking about. I don't want to spoil anything, but suffice it to say that those relationships form a pretty integral pillar that holds up the book, and devastating. Just, it destroyed me. What happened between those four siblings just absolutely destroyed me. But in a good way, you know, in a good way. So that's one thing, family, that the book deals with. And then murder mystery, court political intrigue. What else did I love about the book? Okay, going off on a less technical aspect, Joanne can write. I mean, like, okay, personally, I love it when POC authors, when their books are like super descriptive and you can really see in your mind's eye what the clothes look like, what the food looks like, what the palace looks like, and so forth. Off the top of my head, I can think of the Bone Witch Universe by Rin Chupeco, very descriptive. The Gilded Wolves, very descriptive. Oh my god, the descriptions of like the inventions and the gowns, beautiful. Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Ngan. Every time that she described like the outfits that Lei and Ren would wear, I could really, really see it in my mind's eye. Empire of Sand by Tasha Suri, also very descriptive of the dances and the rituals, and of course the Amriti clothes that Mare wears. So Descendant of the Crane is one of those books I could really see in my mind's eye all the fashionable gowns and robes and so forth that Lillian had made for Hesina, and the palace, and the city, and the when she describes like how some of the people in the city live in like abject poverty, you can really see it. So the writing is beautiful. The writing is lyrical, almost, I would call it. Another thing that I also loved about the book was how it took the time to really talk about the nitty-gritty and the ins and outs of governing a kingdom. How to be a queen 101, basically. You don't really see many fantasy novels with kings and queens that do that, or at least fantasy novels that became like big things. Off the top of my head, I can only think of two. The Bone Witch, again, which discusses like the politics and the import and trade and export between all the kingdoms, covered in that series. And then also Jade City, which discusses how the presence of jade and the clans affects things like tourism, trade, education, business, and so forth. So Descendant of the Crane also does that. You really see how Hesina struggles to learn how things work in the kingdom, basically. Like, well, not learn, because like she's already been trained for that since a very young age, but like how she transitions from just reading about figures and so forth in her textbooks and her scrolls and whatnot with her tutors, and actually like implementing policy and doing things like diplomacy and trade and meeting with the rulers of other kingdoms, and things like waste management, which let's be fair, not a lot of fantasy novels do talk about like the waste management of their fictional kingdom. So yeah, I appreciated the attention to detail. I don't know if I've ever talked about it on my blog, but as a organizational development student, specializing in the running of government agencies, I did appreciate that particular attention to detail of like how a ruler would transition from learning about the kingdom that he or she, that they, gender neutrality, that they are supposed to rule, to actually doing it. So I really did appreciate, that's one of the little details that really stuck with me after. Basically, Descendant of the Crane was amazing. It was an experience from the very beginning to the very end. It took me a while to read it, mostly because I really wanted to savor it. I didn't want the story to end. I didn't want to have to flip to the last page on my iPad, my electronic arc, and also I was just really absorbing everything that was happening. So yeah, it's definitely one of my top reads for 2019. Easily 5 stars, easily. If there's one thing I could critique about Descendant of the Crane, spoiler alert, this is gonna reveal a little bit about the book, so maybe skip maybe 15 seconds, I guess, forward if you don't want to hear it. But yeah, I felt like the romance between Hasina and Akira is the convict with the rod who the soothsayer says will be able to help Hasina solve her father's murder. I felt like the romance was a little rushed. I didn't feel the chemistry so much, but it did not completely take away from my enjoyment of the book. It did not affect my rating at all. I do say that I do think that the romance was rushed, but 5 stars, still 5 stars. Yeah, and I guess that's it. I basically just poured out everything that I feel about Descendant of the Crane in a really unorganized, not chronological, not orderly at all way. So this is just me rambling on and on about how much I loved it, which I do so much, and a lot of people do. It's worth the hype. I know that there's a bit of hesitance to touch hype books, but believe me when I say that Descendant of the Crane in particular was worth the hype. So much worth the hype. It comes out April 9, which is actually also when me and Shalea fly back to Manila. But yeah, it comes out April 9, so you can order it then on Amazon, Book Depository. If you'd like to receive it right away, you can pre-order it off of the websites that I just mentioned. Filipino readers, I'm not sure if Descendant of the Crane is coming to fully booked and National Bookstore and Power Books. I think it will. I'm not sure. I think I heard someone mention, or fully booked Twitter account at least, say that they would stock Descendant of the Crane, but you never know. But still, here's hoping. Make sure to request it. Tag fully booked and tag Power Books and National Bookstore so that they know that there's a demand. And basically that's it. Joanne, thank you so much for writing this book. It was beautiful, it was amazing. I cannot wait to read the next one. I hope that the next one comes out soon, because when I read that epilogue I was just like, what the right? But yeah, I know there's an issue with the pre-orders for Book Depository, but I hope it doesn't really turn people off of pre-ordering Descendant of the Crane, because it's an amazing book and Joanne deserves it. Joanne deserves everything for creating this magnificent universe that I can't wait to see more of. So yeah, so that ends my first video review of a book. I hope it wasn't too way out there. Yeah, I have no good equipment. I have no proper camera. I have no editing equipment. I'm not wearing any makeup aside from my eyebrows. So that was an experience. Anyway, so yeah, I might do this again sometime. I don't know. But anyway, Descendant of the Crane comes out next April 9, next Tuesday. Yeah, Descendant of the Crane comes out April 9, next Tuesday. Pre-order it or order it. Just buy it. Buy it and read it. You will not regret it. Trust me. 5 stars. 5 stars. Bye, Z's!